Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling a subject that honestly sits right at the intersection of technology, some pretty intense mathematics, and frankly, some very high-stakes decision-making.
It really does.
We are looking at the world of drone mapping, but I want to be really clear right from the jump. We are not talking about, flying a drone at the beach and taking some pretty pictures of the sunset.
No, this is a whole different universe. We're diving into the rigorous, the exacting, and yeah, you said it, the kind of stressful world of engineering-grade photogrammetry.
It's a fascinating topic because it feels like it represents a real shift in mindset.
It's a total paradigm shift. You go from being a pilot, someone who's just, operating a machine, to being a surveyor, or at the very least, a data engineer who is responsible for the integrity of a map.
And the source material we have for this deep dive is just incredibly rich. We've got these dense technical guides on photogrammetry, pilot handbooks. We're looking at regulatory frameworks covering both the US and Canada.
And even some really practical case studies on workflow efficiency.
But the hook, the thing that really grabbed me right off the bat, was this distinction the sources make between souvenirs and science.
That is the perfect way to frame it. I mean, that's a fundamental divide in this entire industry.
The sources basically draw this line in the sand. On one side, you have taking cool drone photos.
That's the souvenir.
Exactly. It's the souvenir. It proves you were there. It looks nice on a website. But on the other side of that line, that's where you find creating engineering-grade maps.
And the analogy they use is just brilliant.
It is. They say a single photo is a snapshot, but a photogrammetry data set is a measuring instrument made out of thousands of snapshots.
That is the core concept right there. That's everything. When you are doing this kind of work, you aren't trying to capture an image that looks pleasing to the human eye. Not necessarily.
Right.
You're capturing data points that a computer can then use to solve a massive, and I mean massive, geometry problem.
And the stakes are just incredibly high because of what the sources call the dangerous competency gap.
I love that phrase. It's so accurate.
It sounds ominous, dangerous competency. What exactly does that mean in this context?
Well, it means that the technology itself has become so user-friendly, so automated, that it completely masks the complexity of what you're creating.
So it feels easy, but it's not.
Exactly. You can go out and buy a consumer drone today. You can fly it up to 400 feet and snap a picture looking straight down. And you know what? It looks like a map. It looks flat, it looks detailed, it looks authoritative.
But it's not.
It's an illusion. Because if a civil engineer takes that image and tries to, say, measure a stockpile of gravel to pay a contractor, or tries to determine the grade of a drainage ditch to prevent a $1 million flood.
And that map is off by just a little bit.
Even a few inches, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in rework. You're talking about legal liability. That's the danger. The tool feels simple, but the output has massive consequences.
So just because your drone practically flies itself, that does not mean you're making a map that would stand up in court.
Not even close. The drone is just the tripod in the sky. I mean, think of it that way. The competency isn't in the flying anymore. The competency is in understanding the geospatial data.
So our mission today is to bridge that gap. We want to really figure out how to achieve that centimeter level accuracy, the kind of accuracy that engineers can actually trust for, legal and construction decisions.
And we aren't just going to talk theory.
No, we have a Mission Lab case file. It's called Project Northgate, and we're going to walk through it later to see how all this actually works in the dirt on a real muddy construction site.
Project Northgate is a perfect example because it hits on all the pain points. Every single one. But before we get there, we really have to strip away all the marketing hype and look at the physics of how this actually works.
Let's set the stage then. We are moving from being the drone guy
to becoming a mapping pilot.
And the fundamental shift here, the mantra for today, is that you are now flying for the math.
That's it. You are not flying for the view, you are flying for the math.
Okay, let's unpack that concept, flying for the math. This brings us to the first big distinction our sources make, and it's a linguistic one that apparently trips a lot of people up.
Oh, constantly.
Photometry versus photogrammetry. I have to admit, when I first saw these words, I thought, okay, tomato, but the experts say these are totally different universes.
They are completely different, and mixing them up is a classic rookie mistake. It tells an expert immediately that you don't know the fundamentals.
So break it down for us. What's photometry?
Photometry is all about measuring light. It's the science of brightness, lux, exposure values. It's about answering the question, how bright is this pixel? That's incredibly useful for, say, optics or lighting design.
But it's not mapping.
It has nothing to do with mapping. Photogrammetry, on the other hand, is the science of using overlapping images to compute 3D geometry. It doesn't really care how bright a pixel is. It cares where that pixel is in 3D space.
So in photometry, you care that the picture looks bright and clear so a human can enjoy it. But in photogrammetry, you care about where the picture was taken from and what that picture sees in relation to the next picture.
Precisely. The key concept here, and we'll keep coming back to this, is that you aren't taking pictures to show something to a human. You're taking pictures so that software can solve a geometry problem.
And that problem, it requires 3 very specific ingredients to even be solvable.
That's right. The sources list these 3 ingredients as overlap, geometry, and math.
Let's break those down. Overlap seems pretty straightforward. You need the pictures to, cover the same stuff. But the sources call it the fuel. Why is it the fuel?
Think about how your own eyes work. You have binocular vision.
Right, 2 eyes.
Your left eye sees an object, let's say a coffee cup on your desk. Your right eye sees the exact same coffee cup, but from a slightly different angle.
A slightly different perspective.
Right. And your brain, in a fraction of a second, takes those 2 slightly different views. It identifies the same features on the coffee cup, and it triangulates the difference in the angle to tell you how far away it is. That's depth perception.
Okay, so that's stereo vision.
Photogrammetry is doing exactly that, but on a massive scale. Instead of 2 eyes, it's using hundreds or even thousands of eyes, which are the individual photos taken by the drone.
But for that to work,
a specific feature on the ground, say a specific crack in the pavement or a painted line in a parking lot, it absolutely must appear in multiple images.
from different angles.
Yes. If that crack only appears in one single photo, the software is completely blind to its depth. It has no context. It's like closing one eye and trying to catch a ball. You lose all the depth data. That feature needs to be seen from multiple angles to be triangulated. That is why high overlap, usually 75% or 80%, is completely non-negotiable.
That makes perfect sense. So if overlap is the fuel, the second ingredient is geometry. And this is the shift in perspective you were talking about.
Exactly. If you took 2 photos from the exact same spot in the sky, you just have 2 identical pictures. You wouldn't get any depth information at all. You need the camera to move.
That motion is what creates the geometry.
That movement creates parallax, the shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And the bigger that shift is between photos up to a point, and the more angles you have on a single point, the stronger your geometry is, the more confident the software is in its solution.
And the third ingredient is the math itself, the secret sauce.
That's the software programs like Pix4D, Agisoft Metashape, or Drone Deploy. I mean, these are incredibly complex algorithms that go through and identify what are called tie points, literally millions of matching pixels across thousands of images, and then they calculate the camera's position and orientation for every single shot to reverse engineer the shape of the ground. It's a staggering amount of computation.
So we know we need overlapping still photos. This brings us to a huge debate in the drone world, and our sources have a very, very strong opinion on this.
Oh, this is a big one.
The debate is video versus stills.
The eternal question.
And here is the logic I usually hear, and it sounds compelling. Modern drones shoot 4K or even 5.1K video. That's a ton of frames per second. So why not just fly over the site recording video and then pull thousands of individual frames from that video file? Wouldn't having more frames give you more overlap and therefore better maps?
On the surface, that logic holds up. It seems intuitive. More is better, right?
All right.
But if we look at the engineering reality, the answer is a hard no. The verdict from every single professional source we have is crystal clear. Do not use video for professional mapping.
So why, if the resolution is 4K, isn't that enough detail?
It's not just about the resolution. It's about how the data is actually written to the memory card. We have to get into the weeds of compression here.
Okay.
Video, even really high-quality video, uses something called interframe compression. It's a trick to save file space.
Interframe, meaning it compresses the frames together.
Sort of, yeah. To save space, video codecs like H.264 or H.265 use different types of frames. You have what are called iframes, which are full standalone pictures, just like a still photo.
Okay, a complete image.
But in between those, you have P frames and B frames. And here's the catch. These are not full pictures. They are just data instructions that tell the video player what changed since the last iframe. They're basically saying, take the last full picture, move these pixels to the left, and make this patch of grass a little bit greener.
So for a human watching a movie, our brain just smooths all of that out and it looks like fluid motion.
Exactly. Our brains are amazing at filling in the gaps, but photogrammetry software doesn't have a human brain. It is looking for pixel-perfect, high-contrast patterns to create a tie point. It needs to be certain.
And if you feed it a P frame.
If you feed it a P frame where the pixel data is interpolated or smeared by the compression algorithm, the software gets confused. It creates noise.
And noise in the math equals errors in the final map.
Precisely. You end up with what's called a noisy point cloud. So instead of a nice flat asphalt road, the surface of the road in your 3D model looks like sandpaper because the software just couldn't quite decide where the surface actually was.
Okay, but what if I have a really high-end cinema drone? I can shoot in, say, ProRes or raw video. That doesn't have that kind of compression. Does that solve the problem?
It solves the compression issue, absolutely. But it introduces a whole new nightmare. Synchronization.
Synchronization.
Yeah. When you take a still photo with a mapping drone, the drone records the exact GPS coordinate and timestamp of that specific millisecond in the EXIF data of the image file. It's hard-baked right into the file.
Right, I've seen that data.
A video file, though, is one giant container. The GPS log is a completely separate data track running alongside it. Trying to perfectly match the timestamp of one specific frame inside that video file to one specific coordinate in a GPS log is incredibly difficult to do with centimeter-level precision.
You're introducing a new source of error.
A huge one. And think about it. If your drone is moving at 10 meters per second, a timing error of just half a second puts your map 5 meters off target. It's completely unusable for engineering.
Wow. Okay. So compression is bad, sync is hard. We haven't even talked about the shutter itself.
And that's the final nail in the coffin for video mapping, the rolling shutter.
The dreaded rolling shutter.
Almost all drone video, and most consumer drone photos for that matter, are recorded using an electronic rolling shutter. And that means the sensor reads the image line by line, usually from top to bottom.
Like a scanner passing over a document.
Exactly like a scanner. Now, imagine you are scanning a piece of paper, but as the scanner head is moving down, you pull the paper sideways. What happens to the scanned image?
The image gets skewed. It turns into a parallelogram instead of a rectangle.
That is the Jello effect. If the drone is moving forward, the bottom of the image is recorded a few milliseconds later than the top of the image. In that time, the ground has moved relative to the camera. This warps the geometry of every single frame you capture.
And since photogrammetry is 100% based on geometry.
You are feeding warped, distorted, untrustworthy geometry into the math engine. The software tries its best to compensate for it, but it's just guessing. It's introducing error at the most fundamental level.
So for engineering-grade accuracy, you need
a global mechanical shutter, period. It's a physical shutter that opens, exposes the entire sensor at the exact same instant, bam, and closes. It freezes that moment in time perfectly with no distortion.
The Propos approach is strictly interval still photos with a mechanical shutter. No video, end of story.
Correct. If you want to be a professional mapper, you take photos. If you want to be a filmmaker, you shoot video. Don't mix them up when the stakes are high.
Okay, let's move on to section 2. We've talked about how to capture the data correctly, but now we need to talk about the goal. Accuracy, and the sources call out what they name the centimeter accurate trap.
Ah, yes. My favorite marketing term.
It seems like every drone manufacturer, every software company, they all put CM accurate on the box.
It is the single most abused term in the entire industry. And on its own, it is completely meaningless marketing fluff unless you define it.
What do you mean define it?
Simply saying centimeter accurate doesn't tell a surveyor anything useful. Is it 1 centimeter accurate? 5? 10? And accurate relative to what? The other side of the construction site? Or a geodetic benchmark on the other side of the country? Under what conditions?
But what is the real standard? If I can't just say it's accurate, what do I need to say to an engineer?
You have to speak the language of statistics. You have to be precise. The real standard is defined by RMSE. That's root mean square error. And you need to break it down into horizontal error, or RMSEH, and vertical error, RMSEV.
I see the term RMSE plastered all over these technical documents. And I'll be honest, it sounds like something I'd purposefully forget after a college statistics exam. But you're telling me this is the holy grail of mapping accuracy.
It really is.
So why can't I just say, this map is accurate to within 2 inches? Why do I need this complicated formula?
Because accurate to within 2 inches is a dangerous oversimplification. Let me ask you this. If you check 10 points on your map, and 9 of them are absolutely perfect, but one of them, way out in the corner, is off by 3 feet, is the map accurate?
I guess.
Leslie.
But that 1 point is a huge problem.
Mostly doesn't work when you're pouring concrete or paying a contractor for 10,000 cubic yards of dirt. That one bad point could cost a fortune. RMSE is basically a stress test for your entire data set.
How does it work?
It takes all the errors, the difference between where the map says a point is and where it actually is, and the first thing it does is square them.
Why square them?
To penalize the outliers. Because you are squaring the error, a large error has a disproportionately huge effect on the final score compared to a small error. A 10-centimeter error has 4 times the impact of a 5-centimeter error. RMSE screams at you if you have inconsistencies.
So it forces you to be consistent across the entire map, not just in the easy spots.
Exactly. Then it averages all those squared errors and takes the square root to bring it back to a normal unit of measurement, like centimeters.
So when the sources talk about the 95% confidence level, what are they actually promising the client? What does that mean in plain English?
It means they are promising probability. They are saying, based on our rigorous testing, we are 95% confident that any random point you choose to measure on this map will be within this specific tolerance. It's an honest acknowledgement that no measurement is ever perfect, but it puts a strict, statistically valid boundary on the potential for error.
But, and here is the kicker, you cannot just claim this accuracy. You can't just run the report and say, look, I have a low RMSE. You have to prove it against reality.
Yes, this gets us to the whole concept of truth anchors.
You cannot use the drone to prove the drone is accurate.
That's classic circular logic, right? You need an independent external source of truth, something on the ground.
And this is where we get into GCPs, ground control points, and checkpoints. I see these terms used interchangeably all the time, but our sources are adamant that they are totally different tools for totally different jobs.
They are the opposite sides of the same coin. Think of it this way. GCPs are the anchors. Checkpoints are the lie detector.
Let's drill into that. GCPs first. What do they do?
GCPs are physical targets you place on the ground before you fly. They can be a simple spray-painted checkerboard on the pavement or a specialized vinyl mat. You then use a high-precision survey, GPS, what's called a rover, to measure the exact coordinate of the center of that target.
Down to the centimeter.
Down to the centimeter or better. You then enter those known coordinates into your photogrammetry software. The software takes your drone map, which might be floating in space slightly wrong, maybe it's tilted a bit or a few feet off to the north, and it digitally twists, stretches, and warps the map until your targets in the photos line up perfectly with the real-world coordinates you typed in.
So GCPs literally tell the map where to be. They are an active part of the construction of the map.
Exactly. They are the foundation. They anchor the model to reality. Now, checkpoints, they look exactly the same on the ground. They're also targets. You also measure them with a high-precision rover. But, and this is the most critical part, you hide them from the processing software.
You hide them. You don't tell the software where they are.
You do not use them to build the map. You process the entire map using only your GCPs as anchors. Then, once the map is completely finished, you go back and you ask the software, okay, smarty pants, based on your math, where do you think this checkpoint is?
And the software gives you a coordinate.
It gives you a coordinate. You then compare that coordinate to the actual true coordinate you measured on the ground with your rover. The difference between those two numbers, that is your error. That is your proof. The average of those errors is what generates your RMSE.
That makes perfect sense. Because if you used all of your measured points as GCPs to build the map,
you'd have nothing independent left to test it against. It's like grading your own homework. Of course you're going to get an A+.
The software will report a near zero error at the GCPs because you forced it to be correct there.
Exactly. If you use a point to move the map, the error at that specific point will be 0 by definition. But that tells you nothing about the accuracy of the area between the points. Checkpoints test those areas in between. They keep you honest.
And there is a key rule mentioned in the sources, often called the 2x rule or sometimes the 3x rule.
Yes, this is fundamental survey practice. The equipment you use to measure your checkpoints must be significantly more accurate than the map you are trying to produce.
You can't use a yardstick to check the accuracy of a precision caliper.
Perfect analogy. If you want your drone map to be accurate to 2 centimeters, you need to measure your ground points with a device that is accurate to 1 centimeter or better. And that means you need survey-grade equipment, RTK rovers, total stations. You can't just use your phone's GPS or a handheld hiking GPS and call it a day.
This all leads us to the hierarchy of accuracy tiers that's outlined in the sources. Because not every map needs to be this perfect.
No, and it absolutely shouldn't be. Trying to achieve engineering-grade accuracy when you don't need it is a waste of time and money.
So what's Tier 1?
Tier 1 is what the sources call postcard accuracy. This is when you use just the drone's internal standard GPS. The map will look right visually, it'll look beautiful, but it might be shifted globally by 2 or 3 meters. It's great for marketing materials or a quick visual update. It's bad for measuring anything.
Then you have Tier 2.
Tier 2 is project accuracy. This is a big step up. Maybe you're using an RTK-equipped drone, but you're not using any ground control. It's pretty good for relative accuracy within the site itself, good for rough progress tracking like, is the laydown yard full yet? But you wouldn't use it to define a legal property boundary.
And Tier 3 is the top of the pyramid, the engineering grade.
That's the full package. You've got GCPs, you've got independent checkpoints, and you deliver a formal QC report. This is for when money is changing hands based on the volume of dirt moved, or when legal boundaries are being defined and recorded. It has to be defensible.
Before we leave this section on accuracy, we have to touch on RTK real-time kinematic on the drone itself. A lot of newer professional drones, like the Mavic 3 Enterprise or the Phantom 4 RTK, come with an RTK module.
Yep.
The sources mentioned there's a big reality check needed here. Does having an RTK drone mean I can just forget about all those ground control points?
That is the biggest and most dangerous myth in the industry right now. It's a myth pushed by marketing departments, not by surveyors.
So what does RTK actually do for me?
RTK improves the camera's position, the geo-coordinates of each photo massively. It knows where the drone is in the sky to within a few centimeters, which is amazing. But, and this is a huge but, RTK does not eliminate the need for checkpoints.
Because you still need to prove it's correct on the ground.
You need to prove it, yes, but also RTK on a drone can be tricked. The connection to the base station can drop for a second. The initialization might not be perfect. The coordinate system parameters might be set up incorrectly. I have personally seen RTK maps that look perfect internally, but the entire model is floating 10 feet in the air.
And without a checkpoint on the ground.
You would never, ever know. Not until the bulldozers show up and start digging 10 feet above where they're supposed to.
So RTK makes the map internally consistent and much easier and faster to process, but checkpoints prove the map is actually tied to the real world correctly.
Perfectly said. With RTK, you can often reduce the number of GCPs you need, but you never, ever eliminate the need for independent verification with checkpoints. Trust, but verify. Always.
All right, let's talk about the gear. Section 3 covers the hardware, what actually matters when you're buying a drone for this kind of work. The sources have a great mantra here. Buy the capability, not the hype.
Yes. It's easy to get distracted by, a drone that can fly 50 miles per hour or has a 10x zoom lens. None of that matters for mapping.
We already established that the #1 non-negotiable feature is a mechanical shutter.
It is the absolute barrier to entry. If you don't have a mechanical shutter, you are fighting an uphill battle against the laws of physics from the very beginning.
The second item on the checklist is RTK capability. We just covered that. It's essential for consistent, absolute positioning.
Right. And the third item on the checklist is sensor size. Why does the size of the camera sensor matter so much?
I would think megapixels would be more important.
Megapixels are part of it, but sensor size is really about light and noise. Construction sites are horrible photographic environments. You have brilliant white concrete right next to a pitch black shadow inside a trench.
High dynamic range.
Extremely high dynamic range. A small sensor, like the one in your phone or a consumer drone, it struggles with that. To see into the shadows, it has to crank up its sensitivity, which introduces digital noise, that grainy, speckly look.
And as we established, noise confuses the photogrammetry software.
It kills the math. A larger sensor, like a 1-inch, a 43, or a full-frame sensor, can gather more light. It gives you clean, crisp, noise-free pixels, even in the shadows. And clean pixels equal clean tie points, which equals clean math.
The sources specifically bring up the Mavic Mini question. This is a hugely popular, small, very affordable drone. So can you map with a Mini?
This is a nuanced answer. Can you technically map with it? Yes. You can fly a grid pattern, you can take photos, and software will stitch them together into something that looks like a map. It's a fantastic tool for learning the principles or for a quick visual progress update for a client who just wants to see what's happening.
But can you do engineering work with it?
Absolutely not, no.
And why not?
Well, for all the reasons we just discussed. It has a small sensor, it has a rolling shutter, not a mechanical one. It lacks an RTK ecosystem, so you're relying entirely on standard, uncorrected GPS tags and a lot of hope. You simply cannot produce defensible centimeter-level results with that class of hardware.
The sources put it bluntly.
They do. They say if you end up in court trying to defend a measurement that was taken with a Mini, the opposing counsel's expert witness will tear you apart. The hardware itself invalidates the claim to engineering-grade accuracy.
That's a sobering thought. Now, what about LiDAR? We hear about LiDAR all the time. It feels like the new, shiny technology. Is it a rival to photogrammetry, or is it a partner?
It's a synergy. They are different tools for different jobs, and they are most powerful when used together.
So when would I choose photogrammetry?
Photogrammetry is amazing for open sites with good, rich texture. Things like gravel, asphalt, dirt, rock. It also gives you that beautiful photorealistic orthomosaic map, which is incredibly valuable for context.
But it has weaknesses.
It does. It struggles with things that are very thin, like power lines or the rigging on a crane. It also struggles with surfaces that have no texture, like a freshly poured sheet of concrete or a blanket of snow.
Because if the concrete is just a uniform, featureless gray, there are no tie points for the overlap to lock onto.
Exactly. If the software looks at two pictures of a white wall, it can't tell where one part of the wall ends and the other begins. It gets lost.
And that's where LiDAR comes in.
That's where LiDAR shines. LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging, shoots out thousands of laser beams per second. It doesn't care about texture or color. It just measures the time it takes for the laser to bounce back, which gives it a precise distance measurement.
So it can see the power lines.
It hits the power lines, it hits the thin branches on a tree, and it can even penetrate through gaps in the leaves to find the actual ground underneath, which is a huge advantage in vegetated areas.
So the hybrid approach, using both, is the gold standard.
On complex sites, ideally, yes. You use the LiDAR data to get the perfect high-fidelity geometry shape, the bare earth model, and then you use the photogrammetry data to paint the color and texture on top of it so you can see what is what.
And the sources make a key point. LiDAR isn't magic. It's not automatically accurate.
No, it's not. LiDAR data also needs to be anchored to GCPs and verified with checkpoints to be legally defensible. It's subject to the same geospatial principles as everything else.
Okay, so we have our philosophy, we have our accuracy standards, and we've picked our hardware.
Yeah.
Now we actually need a plan to fly. Section 4 introduces what sources call the MAP3 method for mission planning.
I really like this framework. It's a simple way to stop you from just, showing up to a site and winging it.
What does MAP3 stand for?
Before you even think about taking off, you have to answer 3 questions. First, M for mission. What is the primary product we are making? Is it a 2D map, a volume calculation, or a full 3D model of a building?
Okay.
Second, A for accuracy. What tier are we aiming for? Is this a Tier 1 postcard, a Tier 2 progress map, or a Tier 3 engineering-grade deliverable?
That determines your ground control requirements.
Exactly. And third, P for pattern. What flight pattern, what flight geometry is required to create that product at that accuracy level?
Let's look at those flight patterns. The most basic one, the one everyone starts with, is the nadir grid.
Nadir is a technical term that just means the camera is pointing straight down, 90 degrees to the ground. You fly back and forth in a series of parallel lines like you're mowing the lawn.
And that's good for FOOP.
It's very efficient. It's perfect for creating 2D maps, those orthomosaics, and for mapping relatively flat terrain to create a digital terrain model, or DTM.
But the sources have a huge warning here. They call it the stockpile fail.
Yeah.
Why does mowing the lawn fail when you're trying to map a big pile of dirt?
It comes back to geometry. Think about what the camera sees. If you're looking straight down at a steep pile of dirt, the sides of that pile are extremely foreshortened from the camera's perspective. The camera gets a great view of the top of the pile, and it gets a great view of the flat ground all around it.
But it can't really see the sides.
It barely sees them. There are very few pixels actually on the slope itself. So when the software tries to reconstruct that slope, it doesn't have enough data points, not enough tie points on the face of the pile.
So what happens to the map? What does it look like?
The pile ends up looking like a melted Hershey's Kiss. The top is there, but the edges are all rounded off and smoothed over. The toe of the pile, that critical line where it meets the ground, gets blurred and indistinct.
And if you're calculating volume,
that's where all your volume is. In those steep sides and at the toe, you can easily be off by 10 to 15% on your final volume calculation just because you only threw straight down. And on a big site, that can be thousands of dollars worth of error.
So what's the solution for stockpiles or buildings?
Oblique orbits. You need to get the camera off nadir. You fly one or more circles around the pile with the camera angled at, say, 30 or 45 degrees.
So now the camera's looking directly at the face of the slope.
Exactly. You are capturing that steep geometry head-on, creating strong tie points all the way up the side of the pile.
And for very complex terrain, like a quarry or a very hilly site?
For that, you often use a double grid or a crosshatch pattern. You fly the whole site with lines going north-south, and then you fly the entire thing again with lines going east-west.
So you're getting two different look angles at every single point on the ground.
Right. It creates a much more robust geometric lock. It's more time-consuming, more batteries, but the data is significantly stronger.
I really like the visualization technique the sources mention, developing a grid brain.
Yes. This is a mental shift. You have to stop thinking like a photographer who is hunting for a pretty shot. You have to start visualizing the flight path as a systematic net that you are casting over the entire site.
You are mowing the lawn in the sky.
That's the perfect way to think about it. And the density of that lawn mowing, how close your lines are together, that's determined by your GSD, your ground sample distance.
The pixel tape measure.
Right. GSD is a simple but critical concept. It's just how much ground area does one single pixel in your camera cover? Is that pixel 1 centimeter wide? 5 centimeters. If you want to achieve 1 centimeter accuracy, you generally need to have a 1 centimeter GSD or better.
And the only way to get a smaller GSD is to fly lower.
Exactly. You can't cheat physics. Flying lower means more flight lines, more photos, more batteries, and more processing time. But it's what's required to get the data density you need for high accuracy work.
All right, this is where I want to slow down and really get into the weeds. We've got the theory down. Now let's apply it. I want to open the case file for Project Northgate.
Let's do it.
Paint the picture for me. We aren't in the classroom anymore. What does this look like in the real world?
Okay, picture this. It's a Tuesday morning, 6:30 a.m. You pull up to the site entrance. It's a 12-acre active construction zone. There's a steel skeleton of a massive warehouse going up in the center. There are mounds of gravel and topsoil everywhere. And it rained hard last night, so the mud is shin deep.
And the client is the site superintendent. Let's call him Jim. Jim has been doing this for 30 years. He doesn't care about your drone's megapixels or your mechanical shutter. What does Jim care about?
Jim cares that he has 40 dump trucks full of expensive base gravel coming in at noon, and he needs to know if he has enough room for them in the laydown yard. He cares that the steel beams that are about to be lifted into place align perfectly with the concrete footings that were poured last week. He wants answers, not excuses.
And he's skeptical.
Oh, he's very skeptical. He looks at your little plastic drone in its case and thinks, how is that toy going to tell me where my $1 million steel needs to go?
This brings us to phase 1 of the project. The negotiation, or as the sources call it, scope lock. And they emphasize that the entire mission is won or lost right here in the site trailer before you even unpack the batteries.
100%. The battle is won in the trailer. So you're sitting in the trailer with Jim. It smells like stale coffee. He pulls up a CAD drawing on a muddy folding table. He points to a corner of the building foundation and says, I need the map to match this.
Now the rookie pilot, the drone guy, says, no problem, Jim, and walks out eager to fly.
And he's already failed. The professional asks the uncomfortable, clarifying question,
which is,
Jim, what coordinate system is this drawing in?
Why does that one question matter so much?
Because if Jim's surveyor set up a local grid, which is very common on construction sites, where they just hammer a piece of rebar into the ground and arbitrarily call it coordinate 1,000, 5,000, 100.
They've created their own little universe.
Their own universe. And you go fly using your drone's default GPS, which is referencing the global WGS84 coordinate system. Your map and his map are not going to line up.
Your map might land 3 feet to the left, and Jim fires you on the spot.
Or worse. Your map could land 3 miles away in virtual space because the coordinate numbers don't match at all. But let's say it's just off by 6 inches. Jim uses your map to order a new concrete pour. The concrete truck arrives, they pour the slab, and suddenly the anchor bolts don't line up with the steel base plates.
That's a $50,000 mistake.
At least. And guess whose fault it is? It's yours, because you didn't ask the right questions.
So the 10 questions list in the source material is really a professional survival guide.
It is. You have to ask. Jim, where are your primary site control points? Can I get the CSV file from your surveyor with the coordinates? You need to physically walk out to that piece of rebar in the mud, put your rover on it, and verify that your system is speaking the same language as his. You are physically tying your digital workflow to his physical reality.
Okay, so we've locked the scope with Jim. We know the coordinate system is, let's say, state plane. We know the vertical datum he's using. Now we move to phase 2, pre-mission and safety.
This is where we have to navigate the regulations, and it's important to note it differs whether you are in the U.S. or Canada.
Let's touch on both, starting with Canada. The sources mention a formal site survey. This isn't just looking around, is it?
No, in Canada, under the Transport Canada rules, a site survey is a formal documented requirement. You have to document all potential obstacles, cranes, power lines, weather conditions, and, crucially, your plan for maintaining distance from uninvolved people. Canada has very strict VLOS visual line of sight rules. You cannot fly over people who aren't part of your specific aviation operation.
And there's a specific date mentioned in the sources, November 4, 2025. What's that about?
That's the date for the rollout of new EVLOS extended visual line of sight regulations in Canada. It's going to change how larger sites are mapped, allowing for trained visual observers or spotters to help extend the operational range. But for now, you are tethered to what you, the pilot, can personally see.
And in the U.S., operating under the FAA's Part 107 rules.
First thing you do is check the airspace. Are we in controlled airspace near an airport? Do we need LA&C authorization to fly? You also have to be compliant with remote ID. But honestly, on an active construction site, the biggest regulation is often OSHA and general liability regarding flying over workers.
You just can't do it.
You can't. You cannot fly a drone over a construction crew that is actively working. It's a massive safety violation.
So how do you manage that on a busy site like Project Northgate? People are everywhere.
You have to coordinate and communicate. You go back to Jim and you ask, where is the crew going to be working between 10:00 and 10:30? If they're working on the north side of the building, you map the south side stockpiles first. You also have to identify the crane schedules.
That seems like a very practical tip that saves a lot of drones.
I have seen it happen. A pilot is flying a pre-programmed grid at 150 feet, head down in their controller. A crane operator doesn't know the drone is there. He swings the boom up to lift a steel beam. Bam, drone down. You have to go talk to the crane operator. You become part of the site's daily safety plan. You wear the vest, the hard hat, the steel-toed boots. You are not a tourist. You are a worker on that site.
Okay, safety is set. We're cleared to fly. Phase 3, the execution. We have to fly the different layers for Project Northgate. We determined from our MAP3 plan that we need an ortho, volumes, and a structure model.
Which means this is not one flight. It's 3 distinct, separate missions with different parameters.
Walk me through them one by one.
Flight 1 is the ortho, the base map. You set up a nadir grid, camera straight down, at maybe 200 feet. You want high overlap, 75% front, 75% side. You fly the entire 12-acre site to get that overall context map. This catches the access roads, the material laydown areas, the overall site progress.
Then Flight 2, the pile.
For the piles, you bring the drone lower, maybe down to 100 feet for a better GSD, and you fly those oblique orbits we talked about, specifically circling the gravel and topsoil stockpiles. You're targeting the steep geometry of the dirt.
And finally, Flight 3, the steel structure.
This is the hardest and often most manual part. You fly what are called facade sweeps. You might be flying manually or using a specialized flight planning app. You fly vertically up and down the steel columns or horizontally across the beams with the camera facing the structure. You need to see underneath the beams. You need to capture the bolt connections. It's intricate work.
And while you're doing all this, the wind is picking up, your fingers are getting cold, and Jim is watching you from the trailer door.
And your batteries are draining. You have to land, swap batteries, take off, and seamlessly resume the mission without leaving any gaps in your data. It's intense. But there is one rule here from the sources that I absolutely love, and it's a lifesaver.
The on-site QA rule.
Never leave the site without checking the data.
Never.
You land the drone after your last flight. You do not put it back in the case yet. You pop the SD card out and put it into a rugged laptop or a tablet right there on the tailgate of your truck. And you spend 10 minutes checking the raw photos.
Well, what are we looking for specifically?
Holes. Did the camera stop firing for 10 seconds because of a buffer issue? It happens. Are any of the images blurry because the wind gusted? Did a big cloud pass over and cause a drastic change in lighting that will mess up the color balance? And most importantly, can you clearly see the spray-painted GCPs and checkpoints you marked on the ground?
Because if you find a mistake right now,
You can pop in a fresh battery and refly that one section in 15 minutes. If you pack up and find that mistake when you're back at the office 50 miles away, you have to make the drive of shame back to the site, reprocess everything, and apologize to Jim for the delay. You look incompetent. 10 minutes of checking on the tailgate saves you a day of pain and embarrassment.
so we've checked the data, it looks good. We head back to the office. This is phase 4, processing and the honest test. We dump all the photos onto the computer.
Right. You import the hundreds, maybe thousands of photos, you run the initial alignment, then you mark your GCPs to anchor the model to Jim's state plane coordinate system. But the critical step, the single step that separates the professionals from the amateurs, is how you handle the checkpoints.
You have to mark them as check, not as control. You hold them back.
You hold them back. You let the software build the entire model without knowing they exist. And then you generate the residuals report. That report lists the difference, the delta X, Y, and Z, between where the map thinks the checkpoint is and where the surveyor's instrument says it is. That report is the product. The map is just a pretty picture without that report.
That leads us perfectly into the final section, section 6, deliverables. What does Jim, the client, actually want? He doesn't want a 50 gigabyte point cloud file that he can't even open on his computer.
Absolutely not. You have to translate the data into decisions. The orthomosaic, that 2D map, is great. He'll use that for his layout meetings, for progress tracking. It's like having Google Earth, but for my site, updated this morning.
But then we get into the DSM versus DTM distinction. This confuses people constantly.
It does. Let's break it down. DSM is digital surface model. DTM is digital terrain model.
What's the difference?
The DSM includes everything the drone saw from the sky. The trucks, the cranes, the stockpiles, the trees, the porta potties. It's a model of the surface of everything. The DTM is bare earth. The software, or more often a human technician, has gone in and digitally stripped away all the stuff to show just the ground itself.
And why does Jim care about the difference?
Because Jim is planning the final grading for the site. He wants to know exactly how much dirt he needs to move to make the parking lot perfectly flat. If you give him a DSM, the software thinks that the site foreman's parked Ford F-150 is a permanent hill made of dirt. It will calculate that he needs to bring in a bulldozer to level the truck.
That would be a very expensive error in the volume calculation.
A huge error. You have to clean the data. You have to deliver a DTM for any kind of grading or earthwork calculation.
And what about contours?
Contours are the native language of civil engineers, those squiggly lines that connect points of equal elevation. They tell the story of the site's topography and, most importantly, how water is going to flow. If you don't clean the vegetation out of your data properly, your contours will look jagged and messy. Engineers hate messy contours.
And finally, the most important deliverable of all,
The QC report.
the proof.
It is more important than the map itself. It lists the coordinate system used, the GSD of the imagery, and, most critically, those checkpoint residuals. It is the one-page document that defends you in a meeting. When Jim's boss asks him, how do we know this volume calculation is right? Jim can slide that QC report across the table and say, because we proved it with an independent check. It builds trust.
It sounds like the role of the pilot is really fundamentally changing. It's less about flying and more about data management.
It's completely different from what it was 5 years ago.
Which brings us to our outro. The sources have this kind of pilot's creed that I think summarizes everything we've talked about perfectly.
Plan the map. Fly for the math. Deliver products that measure up.
It really is that shift from creating souvenirs, which just prove you were there, to creating spatial data, which proves where things are, with verifiable accuracy.
And if we look at the future, automation is taking over more and more of the actual flying. Drones are flying these grid patterns by themselves. The drone in a box solution is coming, where the drone literally lives on the construction site in a weatherproof box and flies an automatic mission every morning at sunrise.
So, and here's the final provocative thought for our listeners to take away. As the drone becomes a robot that flies itself, your value as a human operator isn't in moving the six anymore. You aren't a pilot in the old Top Gun sense of the word.
No, not at all. Your value is in understanding and guaranteeing the data integrity.
So if your drone flies itself, are you a pilot? Or are you a data engineer who happens to wear a safety vest?
And more importantly, are you ready to stand in a meeting and defend your data when a skeptical engineer looks you in the eye and asks, how do you know this volume is correct?
That is the question that really matters. It's not how cool is your drone, but how defensible is your data?
That's the million-dollar question.
Something to think about next time you head out to the site. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into engineering-grade photogrammetry. We'll see you on the next one.
Safe flying out there.
And accurate mapping.
That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.